I hit go live instead of launching the countdown. So, and then right when I did that, you could tell I'm out of practice. I don't even know why I'm doing the countdown. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on episode 152 of Blowback, Exposing Imperial Decline. I am one of your co-hosts, Billy Bob, and I am streaming live from the West Coast. I've got my other co-host, Ian Kummer, from a suburb in Moscow. It is not morning in Moscow, but I'm going to say it's 8 p.m., but it's probably 7 p.m.
Yes, it's 7 p.m. here.
I also have my other co-host, Carlo Parcelli, from what we call Satan's Anus, Washington, D.C., and it is, I believe, noon time there. And then our special guest, Greg Rosen from Chicago, Illinois. I believe it is morning in Chicago, 11 a.m. So we were throwing around titles for this episode. We ended up on Donald Trump, Establishmentarian. But it also could have been, we were thinking, Epstein is innocent, free Ghislaine Maxwell immediately. How dare we, have this innocent woman in prison for 20 years? And that's just, that's sarcasm. I mean, it just seems so transparently obvious that, both Democrats and Republicans have a vested interest in keeping, the whole Epstein episode under wraps. And, just like the JFK assassination, they don't want to tell on themselves. They don't want to expose the machinations of the ruling oligarchy, the ruling uniparty oligarchy, to the people that they, pretend to serve. It's such a preposterous pretense. Nobody should fall for it, but they pretend to serve us, and so they could never admit and be fully transparent. But that is not the only reason that Trump is exposing himself as an establishmentarian, not an anti-establishmentarian, but as an establishmentarian. What's going on? He's finally revealing his true colors, you could say. And since he is not, being able to connive and con Russia into surrendering, and to capitulating, he's, which I think was the hope, right? He was hoping to maintain good relationships and weasel them into some kind of a bad, a bad agreement, a bad strategy, kind of like what happened with Gorbachev, with the dismantling of the Soviet Union. But since there's no real chance that that's going to happen, Trump is now, showing what he really thinks about Putin. He's cursing, he's saying he's really mad at him for not capitulating. And so in many ways, Donald Trump is exposing himself as, part and parcel of the establishment. And there's a continuation, Brian Berletic always talks about the continuation of policy through successive presidential regimes. And Donald Trump is showing that, he's no different. But where to go from there? Ian, you've got thoughts, I can tell.
Well, I mean, it's just, I find the whole thing, it's peculiar. I mean, we could go with the idea that this is what Trump was going to do all along, which is possible. I don't know what his motives are, because this is his second term in office. So it's he's got nowhere to go from here politically. So there's not. I don't quite understand motive, because the motive is to basically do the opposite of what he campaigned on, which is like, okay, but it's going against even the populist insurgency, if you will, within the conservative establishment, within the Republican Party. They supported very specific things, both domestically and foreign policy. And he's, for the large part, doing the opposite. And so, like, bringing in establishment people like Little Rubio and all those guys, I mean, that made sense. If it's like, okay, I could see they're making peace with the establishment, saying, hey, look, we won't outright, tear down everything you guys like, but you need to work with us. So at the time, even on the show, I was saying, well, that makes sense. I could see why they would, do that. But they're not even doing that, because they're not really doing anything that, the Tucker Carlson, I'll just call him the Tucker Carlson crowd. He's not really doing anything the Tucker Carlson crowd wanted. Even those big guys like Tucker himself are like, well, wait a minute, you're not doing anything that you said you were doing, that we told you we wanted. So it's like, what is he gaining from it? I mean, we can theorize, we can guess what he's getting for it, but it's just, I find it particular, especially because I think Trump's legacy is very important to Trump himself, right? So if he went in and did all that, if he actually even got halfway there for, all the stuff he talked about, both in 2016 and in, I guess 2016, 2020, and then 2024, right? If he got even half that stuff done, he would have a legacy as an anti-establishment candidate. I mean, it would be fair. You could call him a right-wing nationalist, or you could call him, whatever you want, but you could call him anti-establishment. Now it's like, what's his legacy? Do what Biden was pretty much going to do for the most part. I mean, what is even legacy? And Carlo has something to say. Yeah, that's pretty much
no. Anyway, so many things are swirling around in my head, but I'd like to go back to the Jerry, the Epstein situation. I mean, this woman Ghislaine, she's in prison, but there's never been anyone convicted. What is she convicted of? I mean, what's been her?
So no, I heard yesterday. My understanding is she was convicted only of trafficking numerous girls to Jeffrey Epstein personally. He was the only person that she was trafficking all these women to. And so how convenient, right? How convenient of a case that you set up. Okay, we're going to get her, but we're only going to prosecute her for trafficking specifically and only to Jeffrey Epstein. It's just disgusting.
So it's just insane because you can go back to Epstein's days in Florida when he actually spent some time in prison for this very activity, and that during that court case there were 6 women mentioned as procurers for pimps for Epstein, and well, let's just leave me that. I was going to veer off and introduce what Ian was talking about, but I'll stay with this for a bit. And as a consequence, Epstein, as a consequence, I lost my train of thought. But as a consequence, when he came up here, obviously, when you look at let's do that. When you look at Trump was obviously on that island. Trump was obviously benefiting carnally from his association with Epstein, and you can see it. I mean, you don't have to be more than a savvy teenager to see it on in his face, and Trump's defensiveness whenever the subject's brought up. Now, there was a point, it harkens back to the grab him by the pussy session he had with the so-called journalist, reporter, whatever, on the bus. That obviously, that Trump does not want that to be in his legacy for some reason. And what is that? What could that reason be? I mean, Ian's right. This term is up soon, and when that term is up, he's got nowhere else to go. I mean, he's not going to. I mean, maybe he can go out on the stump and they can pay off big crowds to show up. I mean, I'm sure. Can he really be worried that the MAGA people will abandon him because of these accusations? No, because they'll either say, "Oh, it's fine, it's Donald Trump," or they'll say they'll draw some complex conspiracy theory around it, which they've already done. So what intrigues me is why Trump is so upset by this revelation coming out and naming him as a conspirator in the Epstein, well, as being duped, I guess, essentially by Epstein. And the only thing that can come to mind is if Trump really made some action toward letting the list come out, and we now know that if there's not a list, there's 2 or 3 truckloads of evidence and information, thousands of hours of tapes that if Trump were to allow any of that to hit the public and damage some of the other people who were involved, that would put Trump in harm's way. Not necessarily his life, but make a martyr out of him somehow. But it would put they would ruin him politically. So, I mean, but I'll go on. I'll cede the panel.
Greg, any thoughts before I start monopolizing everything again?
I mean, I'm dubious about why we need a conspiracy theory to explain Trump following the same foreign policy we've been following since the 40s towards Russia. You know, and like Ian was saying, I mean, I don't know that it makes sense that he hired so many neocons if he intended to try to end the war in Russia. And the other thought is, did he ever have a strategy? Was there a viable strategy?
I mean, it seems like it was a difference in tactics, right? Trump had a certain tactic that was different than the one being pursued by the Democrats. And, when that tactic didn't bear fruit, then, he reveals himself for having the same, the same end goal in mind. But he was trying a different tactic and it didn't work. But
isn't it more Minsk 3, right?
On Monday, he's supposed to have a policy announcement, right, regarding Ukraine, about more weapons shipments. And my understanding is that everything that Ukraine has gotten so far under the Trump presidency was something that the Biden administration has ordered. And this will be the first announcement of a weapons shipment, authorized solely by Trump. I mean, that's what I've heard. I'm not sure if that's true.
Yeah, 300 million is what I heard.
Yeah, 300 million. But they still don't have a viable strategy. I mean, it seems like Trump was hoping to ingratiate himself with Putin and make nice and fool him really into doing something stupid. And when he realizes that's not working out, he's just going back to the same old that we've had under Biden. And I did have a whole bunch of thoughts while Ian was talking too, and then they're in a compartment in my brain that I can't access at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we should stay with Epstein a little longer.
Okay.
It's in the news. And,
yeah. Okay, what about, I'm going to make a prediction. Ghislaine, is that how you say your name? I don't know. It's how it's spelled.
Sure.
Ghislain.
Yeah, I've heard Ghislaine too.
I expect she will be pardoned by Trump before, he leaves office, because they don't want to piss her off. And, they don't want to have to kill her, and she's playing ball. And so I think that's how they're going to buy her silence is, they're going to give her a pardon at the end of Trump's term. And I think that's almost certain to happen. I mean, if they make her do 20 years, isn't she going to do a plea deal? Well, I don't know. Nobody's even going to offer a plea deal if you.
I think they arranged this in a way, like Carlos said, they arranged it in a way so she's guilty while everybody besides Epstein and her is magically not guilty. So I think they engineered that revelation in a way that she can't, where she can't get, she can't appeal or anything, and she can't even contradict the story. Because what can she really say at this point that's convincing?
And initially, initially there were 150 girls and women who identified having been procured by the Epstein cabal, and 138, I believe, signed non-disclosure. Thank you. Non-disclosure agreements, and they're out of it. They cannot talk about it. 12 of them were brave enough to come forward, and you could see what happened to a number of them. Their lives were ruined. The one young woman who was, she wasn't young now, she was in middle age. I can't remember her name. I'm sorry, but she committed suicide several weeks ago. The burden being, and of course, conspiracy theorists go, "Oh, did she kill herself, or was that retribution?" I live in Washington, D.C. My first guess is retribution. Somebody killed her,
Yeah.
And it's just.
Yeah. Do we want to talk about the different, ideological perspectives that try and explain the Epstein, thing? So I think it's obvious and true that he was working on behalf of the global elites, let's say, in order to make sure that the transient politicians behave themselves and are controlled, easily controlled. Because the oligarchs, don't really like politicians, flexing their muscles and utilizing their power. They like to have them controlled. And so this is like a way that, politicians can be held accountable and controlled, by the oligarch class through blackmail and things like that. And so it seems obvious that, Epstein was involved in blackmailing politicians, powerful people, bankers, right? And, and the question is, in whose interest? Because I know that there's a subset of people out there, who think in terms of race, and they're just certain that the explanation for everything is a Jewish conspiracy where the Jews are behind everything, trying to rule the world and control all the governments, and
Well, I don't know. I would say it's actually more likely than it's the global elites telling Trump to do it, because one, we know Epstein was.
Oh.
Well,
we know Epstein was and then a cliffhanger, a big cliffhanger.
We know he was a tool of the empire. I mean, blackmail is rampant in DC.
So
everyone's blackmailed in one way or another.
Who was the prosecutor that went after him the first time? And he is on record as saying he was told that Epstein is intelligence and don't mess with him. He's involved in doing work for the intelligence agencies.
That was in Florida, yeah.
And it begs the question, number one, is there an important difference between Mossad and CIA? I mean, can they all be seen as the same intelligence agency, kind of like Five Eyes, is all just one intelligence agency?
Well,
it's not the same, but closely aligned.
It's the way the system works, and there, I point out, there are conflicts within the system among these powerful elites, and they don't want to see. They didn't want to see somebody like Trump go off the reservation. Well, you can use a racist phrase. So they put this before Trump. Trump is at the center of this, um, I mean, you just look at the man, and you can see how uneasy he looks, and how defensive he gets. Immediately defensive if he's asked about it, and he thought he could put it behind him. He's always been able to put these things behind him, and for some reason, he's not quite sure he can do that with this. I don't know if it's personal. Maybe the guy still has, maybe the psychopath still has some feelings under that narcissistic, orange, orange stuff he powders on his face. But something's really upset him and made him very uneasy.
Well, yeah, I mean, narcissism's all about defending oneself, right?
That's one of its major traits. Yeah, when it's
So-
bad, blame somebody else.
I had a general observation regarding how the oligarchy functions, and I'm reminded a lot of Barack Obama in 2008. And Barack Obama really sold himself as an anti-establishmentarian, as being opposed to the wars of the
Right.
establishment, because remember, Hillary Clinton was all for the Iraq war, and that was a big selling point for Barack. Like, no, I was against that war, and she was for it. And so he ingratiated himself with the people. And the reality of it is, the oligarchs care about what the people think, and they try and figure out how to sell themselves to the people at least every 4 years. Now, they don't just outright sell themselves. They need to maintain certain narratives and certain establishment, ideas. But within this, within these constraints, they do their best to appeal to voters. And so we saw that Barack Obama did that. And honestly, like in 2008, I would have voted for him. It was just a matter of me being lazy that I didn't go out and actually vote for him. Now, by 2012, I knew better. And like I was upfront about, he deceived me. And I mean, I am no longer on board. He is same as the rest of them. Citibank picked his cabinet, and, expanding the drone war, all the deportations, and et cetera, et cetera. He's no different than any of the rest of them. But Donald Trump was the same way, right? And he really pushed this anti-establishmentarian bullshit that really turned people on, because everybody is sick to death of the bipartisan ruling establishment, business as usual. Everybody knows that the establishment doesn't give a fuck about them. But this is the thing about class, right? This is the reality of oppositional class interests. The ruling class, the wealthy elites, the ownership class, they have interests that are different than the interests of the masses, but they want to obfuscate that. They want to, make that not obvious to people. And so, they divide themselves into these two competing parties, and then, try and present the illusion of choice. You can vote for these people or these people, and there's a difference between them. But in reality, they own both parties. And again, they try and get elected based on appealing to what they think the masses want to hear. But in reality, they're just wanting to get in power, their little particular clique in power, so they can, pursue the class interest. And that's what Trump cares about. Trump cares about looking good to his elite buddies. He cares about his legacy from the perspective of his elite buddies. And so now, I mean, you see him wishing Lindsey Graham happy birthday. You see him, denouncing Putin, just like, Lindsey Graham did not too long ago. So we can see a real shift, a real change in, and a tossing out, a throwing under the bus of the anti-establishmentarian rhetoric that made him popular and got him elected. So it's just so obvious. Now, it's, some people were always opposed to Trump, but these were kind of the Democrats, right? Like the liberals were always opposed to Trump, and they were opposed to Trump from a position of, hey, the Democrats, let's get Biden in, let's get Kamala in. I don't know. To me, I was definitely not certain to what extent Trump would push and engage in anti-establishmentarian, pro-nationalist kind of an approach. And but it seems obvious now that his claims about exposing JFK, exposing Epstein, having a good relationship with Russia, being peace, just bringing peace, being a president that brings peace to the planet and ending our forever perpetual wars. Like all of that was nonsensical rhetoric that was just, given to, get into power. Now, once he's in power, obviously he's showing his true colors. I mean, this just seems so obvious. And I think a lot of people probably are saying, well, I knew that from the very beginning, which is fair.
Trump doesn't have any true colors. What goes on is that the elites can read the American public, and they do value elections in that regard. It's another quiver. It's another arrow in their quiver. It's a democracy. You get to vote every 4 years, and so they read that people are really discontent generally, and that Trump has actually obviously tapped into this discontent, and so they go with him, and the word comes down, or goes up to whoever it goes up to, and CIA and says and the FBI and other institutions in Washington say no problem. We've handled this any number of times before. We can do it again. It's not going to be a problem. Trump's nationalism is not going to get out of hand. We can deal with it, and they get, and certainly they are dealing with it. They're dealing with it in a marvelous way. I mean, they've got angles that they come up with that a poor peasant like me couldn't dream of in 1,000 years. I cannot keep up with that kind of perfidy and lying. It's like Lenny Bruce said about the Chicago Democratic machine, the Daily machine. They're so corrupt, it's thrilling. And they are. They can handle this. They're not having a problem. I think I want to go back to it again, but I can't imagine why Trump is so concerned about this coming out now, because it has no teeth. The list of people who were on Epstein's island or flew on his plane, it obviously exists, and if it doesn't exist in a raw form of a list, it's certainly there in evidentiary nature. But until, of course, the FBI begins to systematically destroy it, of course, Kash Patel is capable of any of that kind of stuff, because that guy is another liar at the core, another core liar.
No, yeah, isn't that an interesting thing? How all these guys that were pushing, the truth telling and all that suddenly just capitulate and become the new establishment, and after pretending they were anti-establishment. It's really something. Again, Monday, I think Trump is supposed to make an announcement regarding the Ukraine war, and he's going to offer more assistance to Ukraine. And I don't know if he can continue to call it Biden's war after that. I don't know. I mean, he can't even do it now, really, but he does. But
well, before I got cut off, I think the deep state cut me off. My internet just cut out. I had to actually switch to my phone. So I think that was the deep state that cut me off there. But what I was going to say, we have to consider, I think it's extraordinary to not even just say it's classified. We're not going to release the client. It exists, but we're not going to release it. I mean, they could have just continued doing that, which they were already doing with that list, and what they've basically been doing with the JFK assassination since it happened. but it's kind of extraordinary that it doesn't exist. And I think the problem with saying that is if it's possibly also in the hands of the Mossad or some other entity. The problem with denying it exists, it kind of looks bad if someone says, "Well, here it is," it gets leaked, or someone else just publishes it. So I have to wonder if that was done in exchange for something. If Israel said, "Well, you know what? You give us something, we'll give you something. We'll just make this little pact to bury that list and not hold it over your heads anymore if you do something for us," which I could actually buy. I just think it have to be something really big, like what would Israel consider big enough to stop holding that over their heads? Would it be maybe an invasion of Iran? Maybe maybe they want more Ukraine war. Maybe that's we can't really know because they're not going to tell us. They're not even going to acknowledge a deal like that exists about a client list that doesn't exist. But if I take a wild shot in the dark, I'd say there was some very big promises made in exchange for that list being.
So the implication is that maybe Trump naturally would not be doing these things, but he's being forced to because of the blackmail, etc.
Right, and I wouldn't completely just outright say Donald Trump is implicated by the list. I mean, I think it's like a 50-50 thing. He could be directly, but if he was, but my problem with him being implicated in it is why did he so boldly say, bring it up all the time and talk about releasing it if he knew he couldn't do that because he's on it. I mean, I could buy the idea that that all the people he's associated with, now that he's in office, are so neck deep in it, he can't. Because when you're in a room of thieves, you're a thief too. Basically, he's, I mean, that's possible also. But I think it's very likely once he was in office, because when he was a private citizen, when he was Citizen Trump for 4 years, ranting on Truth Social, as far as I know, he wasn't, I think that's actually stated, he was not receiving briefings in that time period. He wasn't really receiving the information you do when you're actually sitting president, or even he wasn't getting any of that. So I think it's entirely possible he didn't know the full story until he sat down back in the Oval Office and they just told him, well, this is
what about the idea that right now he has an agenda and he's trying to get support for this agenda, and he's hearing from powerful people whose support he wants that they don't like this whole Epstein thing and they need it to go away? Is that to me, that's another likely explanation of what the timing. He wants the Federal Reserve chairman to lower rates. He might end up impeaching the chairman, and you got a bunch of bankers, and he's like, hey, we got to put pressure on him. And the bankers, like Jamie Dimon's on the list. Jamie Dimon's a big kid fucker. I mean, I'm probably gonna get in trouble now for saying that, but no, all of these disgusting elites who just have their own universe that is entirely disconnected from anything working people understand are involved in these disgusting things. And if Trump is trying to get support from other elites for his agenda, and they're telling him, okay, well, we'll support you in this, but you got to do this. I think that kind of horse trading might explain the timing and the quickness with which we just all of a sudden overnight Epstein is gone. Like, it's all done.
What parts? Okay, sure, I could buy that, but what part of the Trump agenda is Trump himself not already abandoned?
Good question.
Well,
you have to think about that one.
What was the question again?
No, I'm talking about Trump's agenda, such as his whole effort to tariff the world, make sure that the U.S. dollar is supported, and really, I think it's about benefiting the the assets of the ownership class, and making sure that he doesn't have an economic collapse on his watch where all of his oligarch friends blame him for their assets plummeting. And so in this regard, he wants to, support, the wealth of the elites and he thinks that lowering rates, I mean, again, I am, I'm obviously engaged in speculating, but it seems like one of his prime interests right now is to get rates lowered. And, he's kind of in a battle to do that. And that could be the kind of thing that, you got a quid pro quo going on, and that could explain the timing of.
I think, I mean, it could be an explanation, but I think it's a little incoherent to be in it because, well, for one, if they want to protect assets and they don't want inflation, you increase rates.
Right.
And you don't lower rates, you increase rates.
Right.
Like Russia increased rates to avoid inflation, and that's what the USA does when they don't want inflation.
Well,
So
what do we think Trump's, why does Trump want to lower rates so much? Because
he's worried about a slowdown.
Yeah,
we can all agree that Trump really wants the Fed to lower rates, right? And he's wanted that for a while.
Well, along with the tariffs.
So when rates are too high, people don't buy stuff. Like, you're not going to buy a house. You don't really want to buy a house or a car if the bank's charging you an arm and a leg in interest. So it can cause a cool down, and it's painful. High rates are painful. And that's why people hate high rates and want to lower rates. But higher rates also prevent inflation.
Right. Which the tariffs are fueling hard.
Right, exactly. Yeah. They would. Yeah.
But again, my question is, why is it so important to Trump to lower rates? So it sounds like you're saying because it's going to help normal people, right? Lower rates are going to be good for normal people, even though it risks inflation. It's going to help normal people to be able to afford a home, a car, etc.
He just doesn't want the economic growth to slow. It's bad pretty much for everybody because it'll explode inflation.
It can help people refinance loans. It can help people get more loans because right now we have a record in all of history, personal debt. I'm not even talking about the national debt. I'm talking about personal debt. It's I don't remember exactly. I think it was like 1.3, 1.4 trillion, something like that. And it's higher than it was during the recession, and it was higher than during COVID as of right now. So lowering, I don't know if that's a smart thing to do in the long term, but it would, like Greg was saying, fuel consumption, because if rates are like, oh, hey, I can play this game of getting another credit card and refinancing my loans, getting low.
I think it would help him make his case that he has done good for the economy, and that's what he really wants to do, right? He wants to make the case that he has done good for the economy. But of course, the people that he's really interested in pleasing and having good things said about him are the wealthy elites. And so, I don't know.
I don't see how you could tie that into Epstein. I'm not seeing the connection there.
Yeah, I don't either. But
Trump also mentioned that each, I think, quarter point in the Fed is worth $300 billion a year in interest payments on the national debt.
That's common knowledge.
Yeah, I'm making I'm using that as an example of the kind of thing that we could have explained the timing. Whereas, he's negotiating with, influential people in the ruling class. He's saying, I want something from you. And I was suggesting that something could be to force the Fed into lowering rates. And they said, well, we'll do that if this Epstein things go away. But yeah, no, that might be totally ridiculous. It might not be true at all. There might be other issues, that he's bargaining over. It's we don't know. We don't know. And maybe we'll know in decades. Who knows?
Could have something to do with bringing manufacturing back to the U.S. I mean, in his mind, he might think that loan process, those interest rates, will fall upon the companies that want to come back and develop an industry here. That's not necessarily the case, because you can do all kinds of private equity deals that don't involve the standard interest rate. But if you have to look at it internationally too, as we grazed, why is Trump suddenly interested? You don't know what Trump understands. The other day, he talked about asylum seekers, and he said he mistook asylum seekers for people who were let out of third world asylums, insane asylums, to come to the U.S. That was the context he was talking about asylum seekers in. So this is a very stupid man, a very, very stupid man. So he was not aware that when Wesley Clark walked into, I guess it was Colin Powell's office or someone else's office, and saw the list of countries in the Middle East and in North Africa that were to be brought down, every single one of them had begun instituting or was about to institute stepping away from the euro dollar. So what do you have now? You have BRICS. You have BRICS. Now Trump has been made all aware of this. Suddenly he's talking about BRICS. Suddenly he's putting a 50% tariff on Brazil. It's like, here's a guy who doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. Has not a clue what he's doing.
Didn't he ask the Liberian president where he learned English?
Yes. This is right.
How did you learn
President
such great English?
Liberia, right? A country founded on the basis of bringing slaves back from the United States to colonize in Africa. This is an idiot.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what can you say logically or contextually about an idiot like that?
So I think it's going to hurt him. I think what he's doing is he's consolidating his support from the people that matter, and he is willingly and knowingly trashing his support from a large part of his base, because those people don't matter, especially once you're in power. Those people might matter to win an election if you believe that, the electoral process is legit. But those people definitely don't matter once you're in office. Who matters are, the other wealthy elites. And so how is this going to affect him going forward? I mean, it seems like it would be disastrous because it's angering a lot of people. It's causing a huge split in his base. But again, I don't think he cares because his base only matters during election time. And like was said earlier, he's not going to face election again.
Well,
and so in a sense, we're seeing the true colors. The true colors.
I mean, he has to worry about Congress to some extent, right?
Well, I think that the things he's doing are going to make Congress happy, and he's going to be able to get support from Congress because we saw his big, beautiful bill got passed. That's part of his agenda. Lowering interest rates definitely seems like is something he's really interested in doing, and I don't see anybody stopping his, even trying to obstruct his agenda. You got lip service from Democrats, but they're not doing anything. They're just, putting on, they're reading their lines, and that's about it. So,
well, in theory, he doesn't want to. In theory, he doesn't want to ruin his popularity with his base, because then he could lose Congress next year.
Okay,
and they'll be harassing him and not passing his stuff.
Yeah, no, and I mean, but if you've got the establishment, the bipartisan establishment on your side, like you don't care if Democrats are elected because they're not gonna, undermine. I don't know. Yeah, we're gonna see how it plays out. I mean, I don't see anybody trying to. So here's the problem: once he does something that causes pain for the American people, and they really start feeling. That's when it's going to be a problem. As long as he can, not allow that to happen, at least through hopefully most of his term. I mean, he's not going to have any accountability. But right now, I don't see any accountability for his actions. And the people that matter, are happy with him. The Lindsey Grahams. The warmongers, they're happy with him, and so there's no accountability. I don't know.
All I know is we have a very defensive response from Trump whenever the pedophilia is brought up.
Yeah.
Maybe he feels that being stamped a pedophile might affect his reputation. I don't think so. It's the United States. What the fuck do people care about hundreds of young women being
No,
trafficked?
it just really seems like, he was told, you need to shelve that, and he is, and he's doing it because he's getting something out of it, right? He was pushing the whole Epstein bullshit because he was getting something out of it, and now he's putting it away because he's getting something out of it. And what is he getting out of it is, we can only conjecture, but I think he can get the support of people who have been against him, heretofore, the liberal establishment. He's getting support.
They're not. No, they're not. They still hate him just as much. I mean, who in the liberal establishment in the last week has said, "Oh, I like Trump now," or even say, "I hate Trump slightly less"? Oh, freaking nobody. I still like my Iran theory. I think in the next 6 months we're going to see a war with Iran, and I think it's very likely the Epstein thing plays into it. That was the price the USA is paying to Israel to bury the Epstein files. I think that's very likely. Because even just a month ago, or even before that missile exchange with Israel and Iran kicked off, I didn't even believe it was possible for the USA and Israel to, I'm sorry, for the USA to start something with Iran, because it wouldn't go well for us. But I've been rethinking that. It's hard to think we won't go to war with Iran at some point this year.
Yeah, no, I like that. I mean, I think I've had those same thoughts that's where they feel they can get a victory, and they've got to go all in. The United States has to go in big, and they have a lot of proxies in the area that they can, use as cannon fodder, especially as, the Ukraine situation deteriorates. I'm just what I'm trying to get my head around is how Epstein played into that, because
he was Mossad, because he was a Mossad guy. Israel has all those files. They could destroy the American political establishment in a day if they wanted to.
But I'm just thinking that, the establishment would have done that without being blackmailed into doing it. Like, they wouldn't. But maybe it was like the straw that broke the camel's back. Maybe it was that extra little push they needed to act.
I mean, attacking Iran would be a disaster for the USA. And I've said that in the show before. It'd be huge, because it's not like attacking Iraq. It's not like attacking Grenada. Yeah. There'd be at the very least, very substantial military losses at a time when when the American population is already extremely war fatigued after 20 years of war, and it'd be very expensive, and it's not even a guaranteed win. So it's just there's nothing to be gained from attacking, and not to mention they could shut off the world's oil supply, and it would be that would be economically devastating. And Israel wants it, but the USA is like, well, it would be disastrous. But so what could Israel hold over the USA's heads that is serious enough, a carrot stick, to coax the USA and saying, okay, regardless of the risks, we're going to go into Iran.
Well, Trump backed down so fast. I don't know.
Well, that puts a lot on.
Right? I mean, he did not want to be in that war.
He didn't. No. Well, and on top of it, they burned through more than 10% of their THAAD stockpile just in 12 days. So imagine if Iran had dragged that out for a month. Just imagine. So I think there was a need to rearm. And the thing is, Israel's losses were, from what people are saying, were substantial. I don't think they're going to let it slide. So I do think that conversation happens. Like, look, we will control, alt, delete. We'll just make these fight. We'll never bring them up again. We'll just, maybe that was the promise made. Maybe, because I have nothing but bad feelings.
The full demand is a full war or just the bombing?
I think I think the USA wants as little, so I don't know what they negotiate, but I think Israel wants a full-scale invasion of Iran. I mean, I'm not even sure how they would carry out one maybe through Pakistan, I guess. I mean, I'm not even sure. It's so different. It's not even geographically easy to get to. But I think that's what
Yeah.
they're pushing for:
Where
full
could we
scale
build
invasion
up?
and occupation. And the USA is just trying to shy away from that. So we're not good. We're, you know, maybe the year will play out. Maybe Trump will leave office, whichever way, and I'll be wrong. Hopefully, I am wrong, honestly. But I think
What about
we're gonna.
just another big push for regime change involving, you know, proxy forces and just trying to decapitate and turn it into Libya? I don't see U.S. boots on the ground, you know, like during the Iraq War.
I
And
mean,
I
they
don't
could
see,
try that. They could try that. It's just it's Iran. It's not Libya. It's not Syria. It's not an Arab pseudo state where it's
Mhm.
they're very post-colonial, very feeble states where you basically take out one guy and the whole state collapse. That doesn't work on Iran. You can't take out one guy or one family and collapse the whole state like with Iraq and with Syria. So I don't. So maybe they'll. So I mean, I don't discount. I mean, I'm sure they'll try, but I don't see those having any chance of working
No,
on Iran either.
Iran's the Persian Empire.
Right.
I don't
It's
see
a
that Trump could
Different.
sell
It's a
that
different.
to the American people. I mean, you know, a full-scale invasion, and you know, we're going to start doing a desert storm kind of style buildup over there, with the express intent of, you know, and we're going to be telegraphing that for months, if not years, as we build up. So, I mean, that's
That's my thought
interesting.
too. But I mean, I thought that too. But the thing is, the recruiting crisis is over. They've already met and exceeded their recruiting goals for 2025. So those last several years of them like meeting only 2/3 or 3/4 of their recruiting goal for the year, despite increasing bonus, is all gone. Like Trump came in and I was
He made America
surprised.
great again.
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised recruit. So I mean, if he can if he can making America great again can restore recruiting rates that fast,
Yeah.
maybe he could get a war.
I thought they lowered quotas, but I might be wrong because I didn't pay close attention.
All you have to do is tank the economy. I mean, for the average person, where are you going to go to work? The military. Happened in my family during Vietnam. So
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that the United States could, formulate some plan and do another, big land invasion. I just never considered that as a plausible possibility. I always thought they're going to use Jolani in Syria. They're going to use different ethnic groups within Iran and Azerbaijan. But no, it's interesting. I mean, you said within the next year, and so we're going to hold you accountable for that, Ian. So that's great. We got you on record.
Mhm.
Yes. So,
But yeah,
well, I don't know. Because the problem is they kind of showed their hands. The problem is they showed their hands for regime change with that last attack, because they had those sleeper cells. They attacked the launchers, and they claimed 1/3 of the launchers destroyed, but I've seen other accounts saying they might have only destroyed 5% of Iran's air defense launchers. The problem is they showed their hand. They're doing arrests. They're doing deportations, right? So they're looking at foreigners in Iran who could be paid to do something like that and say, well, maybe that these people don't need to be here. I mean, they're doing a bunch of things. I think that's going to be. I mean, it's a little embarrassing. Iran got caught at all after what happened in Lebanon and after what happened in Syria. It's still a little embarrassing. They still got caught with their pants down, but I don't think they're going to be able to do that a second time. So that's
yeah.
going to make regime change harder, short of a actual invasion.
Yeah, no, I mean, you would hope that Iran is, learning from what happened and, strengthening their weaknesses, their officials, all the important people in the military, in the government. Obviously, they're all going to be targets again, because the ultimate thing is to, fulfill the Zionist project of Greater Israel, make sure Israel is the unparalleled, unrivaled global regional hegemon, and then implement this Abraham Accords economic deal that is going to entrench all the puppets, the Western puppets in UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan. And it's going to be bad for the people, but it's a way for the West to solidify economic and political control through pushing the Abraham Accords, getting rid of the Palestinian issue once and for all. They want to get rid of the Palestinian issue. They want to, occupy Gaza. They want to occupy the West Bank. No more talk about a Palestinian state. And all this is to further, imperialist hegemony in the Middle East. And they haven't given up that hope. And they've been working towards that goal with the war, in Gaza, with the genocide, with what they're doing in the West Bank, and with all these attacks against Iran, with what they did in Syria. They're moving closer and closer to, achieve their vision of Greater Israel, the Abraham Accords, and just consolidating their control, economic and political, in that region. And what they need to do is to ideally give up on that effort and embrace morality and justice, right? Morality and justice, allowing the people to govern themselves, and allowing justice for the Palestinian people especially. So Iran has not given up resisting these efforts, these imperialist efforts. Iran continues to resist. I'm optimistic that Russia is going to step up its support of Iran. China is going to step up support of Iran. And Iran is not going to be vulnerable in the way Libya was vulnerable, in the way Syria was vulnerable. It's super important. And I think Russia and China understand the importance. And I don't know. I've seen a lot of headlines where, China is making it clear that Iran is an ally, and we will support them, and we will not allow them to be regime changed. But we want to see concrete steps being implemented. Hopefully, I am not entirely wrong about the strength of Iran, like I was wrong about the strength of Syria. I thought Syria was strong. I thought they had won the Western efforts and I thought it was just a matter of time before they end up getting all of their land back. And we found out that was exactly, untrue.
But in a way, going back to Syria, it reminds me that Israel, you can talk about their imperialist enterprise, but you can say that they did like a lot of empires do, right? They've expanded too much. I mean, believe me, the leadership in Syria right now, some guy's named Jalani, is that his? He's not a friend of Israel's. I mean, you can talk. Believe me, when he goes to bed at night, he reminds himself he's not a friend of Israel's.
I think.
Yeah, I don't think he's principled. He doesn't have principles. He's a tool. He's a total tool.
Yeah, but he believe me.
He's not against Israel either. He can be bought.
So
apparently
he agreed to normalize relations with Israel and to hand them the Golan Heights. So he's a capitulator.
I'm sorry, you can't look at these groups that have attacked just about everybody except Israel and say, oh, well, actually, they hate Israel too. Well, if they hate Israel, they have a weird way of showing it. Because not ISIS, HTS.
On the side of the imperialists. They are on the side
of the anti-Israel by any stretch of the.
I mean, the one thing that supports what Carlo's saying is Israel's reaction has been hostile and paranoid towards HTS, right?
Well, I mean, they're just
taking advantage of it. They're taking advantage of it. They destroyed their air defenses, which took decades to build up, and they took the land they wanted. I'm sure they consider it a good thing that Christians and ethnic minorities that they hate are being killed. I'm sure all those things are good things from Israel's
they're consolidating their gains. They're opportunistically consolidating, and they want to deal with Jolani from a position of strength, for sure. They don't want to, They're not stupid enough to, give him leverage that they don't have to give him. But to say that, no, the Zionists need people like that. I mean, the whole idea about ISIS and Al Qaeda, is to demonize Arabs, and through this demonization of Arabs and Islam, that's how the Zionism thrives. And it's there for the propaganda value as well, but yeah, it's ISIS and Al Qaeda have always been tools, supported, led, trained, engaged in efforts to further Western interests, and and the U.S. was able to go in there with the lie that we're attacking ISIS, but we weren't. We were attacking Syria, and we were stealing Syrian territory, their most important territory, which was the oil and wheat fields.
I mean, the one wrinkle is, I think Turkey drove the takeover of Syria more than the U.S., and Israel has decided Turkey is a bigger threat even than Iran.
Well, the Greater Turkey movement is a little strange because they have this influence in Syria, they're occupying territory in northern Syria. They're trying to expand influence into Azerbaijan. They're doing all this.
Northern Lebanon.
Greater Turkey, which is interesting because their own house is kind of a mess. Turkey's a mess. But Erdogan's very ambitious. Let's call it. He's very ambitious, and he's not principled, and he doesn't really have any allies because he plays all sides as much as he can. He plays Russia as much as he can. He plays USA as much as he can. He plays these, and it's interesting. Turkey doesn't really give them money or anything. He doesn't really give these. It's interesting. He doesn't really give these people anything, but they're still trying to, and I think what's happening in Azerbaijan right now is potentially a problem because Russia supplies Iran through Azerbaijan. That's their land link to Iran. So if they get into a feud and they sever economic ties, I mean, it's not going to hurt Russia because Azerbaijan does not provide them anything they couldn't get somewhere else. It would hurt Azerbaijan more than it would hurt Russia, but it would potentially be a problem for Iran because that's the link from Russia to Iran is Azerbaijan.
Yeah, it's interesting. Marandi, he's the great Iranian spokesperson, does the social media rounds. I mean, his take is that, Azerbaijan is weak and, there's a lot of pro-Iranian Azeris and that they better think twice before they go all in on the side of the West because, that government can be toppled and, friendly Iranian regime can be put in its place. So it was interesting. He definitely spoke with confidence when he was discussing, the Western efforts to weaponize Azerbaijan against Iran. So, I mean, again, you have to speak with confidence. You don't want to say, oh yeah, we're screwed. So who knows what the reality is, but definitely it seems to be the new strategy, part of the new strategy in the continued effort to regime change Iran. And again, that effort has not gone away. Just because the 12-day war ended, the intent and the desire and the planning and plotting to regime change Iran has not changed. And so everybody ought to know that. And I think Iran knows that better than anyone. And hopefully they're going to be able to strengthen themselves. How do we tie this in with Trump being, well, I mean, the whole idea that Trump was a peacemaker. Okay, what do you got? Do you think that he should get the Nobel Peace Prize? Like when Netanyahu, submits his name as the next recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize. It actually matches, because I think Hitler, a few wealthy elites during Hitler's time nominated him as well for a Nobel Prize. So,
well, if Trump gets the Nobel Peace Prize like Obama did, then I think we're definitely going to war. At that point, it's like you give whoever the U.S. president is the Nobel Peace Prize right before you start another major war. Maybe that's the trend now.
I've underestimated how absurd the world can get. There was a poet named Ed Dorn, who very far leftist, and I read with it once. His famous poem is called Gunslinger, and it's about imperialism largely. But he used to call the Nobel Prize the Dynamite Prize, going back to its source. But I want to one thing about going back to Syria, and that is Turkey. They've signed agreements with the Kurds, haven't they? I mean, I believe they've signed a number of agreements. And in northern Syria, that's another place that's rife with oil. Ibril, I think it's called, another region where the Kurds are. The Barzani family used to sort of run the syndicate up there, and that to me would not bode well for any government trying to hold on to Syria in the fragmented state it's in right now. I think that Turkey has ambitions of its own, and I think that might play a role in the notion that Israel has overexpanded its imperial ambitions. There's 92 million people alive in Iran. There's, at last time, and this doesn't include people fleeing the country, there was just about 10 million people in Israel proper, and that's that'll tell you something about what the kind of power that Iran can muster against a tiny country like Israel. The other thing is, bombing has never proven to be a solution to be something that you can, unless you want to include Libya, that brings about the kind of change that you want. I know during Vietnam and Laos, just monumental amounts of ordnance were dropped on those two countries, and more than in World War II, of all the ordnance combined, both the Axis powers and the Allies, and the atomic bombs.
Yeah,
more was dropped, and they
want to end Iranian resistance to the imperial agenda in the Middle East, which is, Greater Israel and the Abraham Accords. And can they bomb Iran into submission? Can they bomb Iran enough so Iran stops resisting? I hope not, because that would mean goodbye Hezbollah in Lebanon, goodbye Palestinians in Gaza Strip and the West Bank. And those are just colossal injustices that I don't want to see happen. And so I'm optimistic that, as the, what is the name of our program? Exposing Imperial Decline. As the empire continues to decline, I hope they get weaker and weaker, and they're not able to facilitate and, implement these kinds of awful injustices. But it's a very dangerous time, as they're declining, because they're lashing out and they're doing all kinds of things that, out of futility and fury, and they're trying to save themselves, and they're not going to be able to. But we were going to transition to another topic of discussion, unbeknownst to Ian or Carlo, but me and Greg we were going to hit on some aspects of China's Chinese history. And that's kind of an abrupt turn. And so I don't know if anybody wants to say have a final thought on what we've been talking for the last hour and 10 minutes before we quickly and briefly turn to Chinese history. Look at Ian's face. Look at Ian's face. He's
Well, I'm thoroughly enjoying watching Trump squirm.
right with the Epstein stuff, right? Is when that comes up and he's like, I can't believe everybody's still talking about that. Well, you're the reason everybody's still talking about it, you dingbat. And like, yeah, no, he's definitely squirming. Like he's in a tough place where, he sold that to the people to get elected, and now he's just doing an obvious 180, and people are like, what the fuck? And so I think they can squash it because they're going to have the aid of the establishment press, right? And they're going to have the aid of the Democrats because the Democrats don't want that coming out. And so they're going to be able to do it. To what ends is the question. Like, yeah, what was the quid pro quo?
So what was Trump's campaign promise on it? What did Trump say he was going to do about Epstein?
Well, he was going to take down the Democratic pedophile ring, Clinton.
He was going to release the papers.
Yeah.
You can see
That's what everybody expected him to do. And remember, he had all those he had like this big televised event where he had all these small time journalist outfits receive some documents. And that might have been more JFK than it was Epstein, but he was selling it like he was giving these undisclosed documents. And then when these small outlets ended up publishing them, turns out there was nothing new. That was already available in the public record. But he pushed it big time, and so did all of his cabinet. Bongino and that other guy Patel. They were hitting that home really hard. Ian, any thoughts before we move on to China? You are muted. Oh, is he frozen? He's probably frozen.
Frozen.
It's hard to tell.
Let me just say, there was that interview where Trump was asked by a Fox News reporter, "Will you release the some papers?" And Trump goes, "Yes." "Will you release the JFK papers?" Trump goes, "Yes." And I've already done some of that, which he has. I mean, it's all been redacted, but some of it's been released. Then the reporter goes, "Will you release the Jeffrey Epstein papers?" And Trump hesitates, and then he goes, "Well, yeah, if it can be proven that everything in them isn't fake news, and it's a lock." Go ahead. I'm sorry, Greg. Go ahead.
No, Ian. I think we were waiting to hear from.
Yeah. Did you have any thoughts, Ian, before we abruptly?
Sorry, I did break up, but yes, I was going to say no. I got nothing.
Nothing. Okay. So Greg, no. Now let me put this up. We have gone over this before. We're going to go a little bit more in depth, but we've had some nice, fun discussions about modern Chinese history from when they became a state in 1949 and even before that, and the different economic approaches. The different approaches to economy that they've engaged in. And so we were going to focus a few minutes on the new democracy time frame, which was 1949 to 1952. Now, that was at the end of the Korean War, the beginning, or the middle?
That was right after the revolution. The Korean War started the next year.
Okay, so the Korean War started in 53?
50, I believe, right?
Okay. So did it end in 53? So I'm just wondering what the significance of 52, because the new democracy ended in 52, and what were the in 52, what was going on with the Korean War? Was it in full swing?
There were a few different things that all happened in 1952. The Korean War was in full swing. The U.S. trade embargo, and one of the markers or goals of this period was to restore industrial output to pre-World War II levels. And in 1952, they reached 1937 levels, with coal, steel, and textiles surpassing production levels. And so the embargo, and then the need for mobilization of resources for the war. And there was profiteering and some hoarding and withholding of supplies. So there's a push to get central control.
So, from the perspective of your average indoctrinated Westerner who alleges that, real socialism is when you don't have any, privately run enterprises, and that is why real socialism is awful and we need to avoid it. And that is also why socialism does not get credit for the success that the Communist Party has had in China. We credit the ideology of capitalism for China's success. So from that perspective, how are we to explain to those people the changes in the economy from 49 to 52, and then from 52 onward, where these people will assert that what happened was authentic socialism, that was authentic socialism, where you really crack down and eliminate private ownership.
Well, Mao would more or less agree, right? And his initial idea was his class. Let me go back up a little bit. The class outline for the new democracy period was the workers and the peasants were going to be politically dominant. The petty bourgeois still existed, tolerated as allies because they were seen as anti-feudal. The national bourgeoisie was temporarily permitted, viewed as progressive in that they contributed to industrialization, but they weren't fully trusted. In reading about Mao's theory on this, he took Lenin's imperialism work very seriously, and said basically that the national bourgeoisie was a misnomer, because in imperialism they would be inevitably linked to outside capitalists, given China's place as a colonized country. So he wanted the period of the NEP to be as short and closely monitored as possible compared to the Soviet period.
Okay.
So in 1952, he unveiled, this was building on an earlier program, but there were the 5 antis, which were bribery, theft of state property, tax evasion, cheating on government contracts, and theft of state secrets. These were the problems he identified in 1952 as reason to start expropriating capital or property from the capitalists. This is similar to what Stalin talked about in the late 1920s that the NEP had caused in Russia with corruption, bribery, attempts to gain political power by the bourgeoisie.
So, one can look at the situation in 1952, where you have the Soviet Union, right, very strong and powerful under Stalin, and China is like the little brother, but they're very tight allies, and it's conceivable that, I mean, it makes sense, right, that there was a turn away from capitalism, right, towards, because you had the Soviet Union engaged in the project of socialism, and they really had also eliminated, for the most part, private ownership of industry. And so together, with all those vast resources, they could have done, things could have turned out a lot different, and they could have maintained a kind of, socialist bloc that, again, could have really rivaled the West. And, if you consider, the resources they had access to, and the kinds of planning that they could have done. But what happened, right? Stalin died. Khrushchev shat all over Stalin's legacy. This really demoralized China and led to the Sino-Soviet split, where China could no longer rely on, this strong socialist, country with all these resources to, assist and facilitate. And so, even though, at one point in time, Mao was pursuing a more, an economic approach that did not, embrace the private ownership of the means of production. Once the Sino-Soviet split started, he really did begin to, ask the West to end their embargo, and he constantly tried to, improve economic relations with the West. And as part of that, the West isn't going to trade with you if the West isn't going to be allowed to invest and exploit your people. And so, so you do see, it's obvious that there are, different economic approaches throughout, China's history. But in 1952, it makes sense that, the material conditions again. So the material conditions. So it's not really an ideological thing. It's more driven by the existing material conditions and what is in the best interest of the nation, the national economy, and, the well-being of the people. And so while definitely it seemed that taking a tack towards abolishing private ownership would have been appropriate in 52, it wasn't that way a couple decades later, and actually really quickly later, once Stalin died and the Sino-Soviet split resulted, then you're totally isolated. And then you need to access, resources, you need to access capital, and which resulted in the Kissinger and Nixon, in 1971. I just saw I'm gonna let you. Sorry, Greg. I just saw a funny video of Kissinger meeting Mao, and Mao in 1971 looked at Kissinger's wife, and she was so tall, and he was like, "She's so much taller than you, Henry. How do you deal with that?" Anyway, it was pretty funny. But you could see that even in 1971, Mao was pretty frail.
Yeah. I was going with your point that the ideology wasn't so much what changed over the decades as the condition of imperialism. Deng never challenged what Mao said about imperialism or the danger of what it would try to do with China, but he viewed the imperialism of the 80s with globalization going on and the US deindustrializing as more manageable and exploitable by China, less dangerous than how Mao viewed it in the 40s and 50s, which makes sense because the US had begun to decline by the 70s. And, he viewed the globalization as a desperate, kind of short-sighted search for profits that China could exploit by getting technology transfer and investment on terms that wouldn't destroy China.
And to me, these discussions always come back to, what is the Marxist thing to do, right? What is the socialist thing to do? Is the Marxist and socialist thing to do the thing that best, furthers the interests of the masses? Or is it is it so is it pragmatic or is it dogmatic? Is it the dogmatic abolition of private ownership, or is it the pragmatic pursuit of the best interest of the working class? And so again, I argue that the Marxist thing to do is whatever is the best pragmatic way to further the interests of the working class. And sometimes that's going to be opposite to the dogmatic implementation of socialism, you know, and of course, China is the case in point. And so what drives things is how you understand the material conditions and what you can identify as the best interest of the working class. And that's going to be the most Marxist thing to do, is to pursue that. And sometimes it's going to contradict the dogmatism. But I'll give you maybe the last word. Maybe the other guys want to get in. Maybe not. Any thoughts, Carlo or Ian? So, as you guys are not you don't have your communist card yet.
I just wanted to say that your pragmatism comes into play when you have much of the world, the imperialist world at that time, standing on your neck. As you mentioned, the U.S. embargo. So to be pragmatic, you have to factor that in. It's not like you have socialist intentions and nobody's bugging you, nobody's bothering you. I mean, after the revolution of 1917, there was some support from the West, but that certainly got muscled down by factors in the West, and it became very hostile toward the Soviet enterprise after the revolution.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying that you have to factor that in. You're right. It's got to be factored in. You got to take it into account.
One of the things that I've been dealing with, you know, even on the 4th of July, you know, I got into a fun discussion with some normal people who were just anti-communist. And I was explaining, you know, my approach, and they were just, you know, they have this idea of what socialism is that is entirely, you know, distinct and different from my perception of what socialism is. And so, you know, how can we let the anti-socialists define what socialism is? But here's the problem. So the anti-socialists believe that socialism is the dogmatic implementation of, you know, the abolition of private ownership. Like, to them, that is what socialism is. And so they say, well, look, Cuba, that's what Cuba is doing. That's what North Korea is doing. And those places are poor and impoverished. And so socialism doesn't work. And they say China didn't do that. And they, to the extent that they went capitalist, they started doing good. So capitalism is what works. And it's just obvious to them. But to me, like, it's totally backwards, because again, North Korea didn't ask to be embargoed. North Korea doesn't want to be embargoed. Cuba doesn't want to be embargoed. Their economy of self-sufficiency is being dictated to them by the material conditions being imposed by Western imperialism. And China, or North Korea and Cuba would be doing something very similar to Vietnam and China if there wasn't a Western imposed embargo against them. And that is actually what socialism is. Socialism is looking at the material conditions, identifying the best strategies and approaches to benefit the working class the most, and to lift them out of poverty, to develop their society, develop their nation. That's what socialism is. And that's socialism contrasts and contradicts with capitalism, because capitalist governments don't think that way. They're not interested in identifying how we can most help the working class. That doesn't enter into it. No, they are the representatives of the oligarchs, of the ownership class, and that's how they govern themselves. They look around the planet and see, how can we benefit ourselves? How can we maintain our huge preponderance of wealth, power, and privilege in this globe? And they don't care. They don't care how it adversely affects the working class, how it kills millions of people, how it results in perpetual war. None of that matters. In fact, all those things are necessary in order to maintain their oligarch system. And so these are the choices that we have, you know, capitalism and oligarchy on the one hand, or pragmatism and the legitimate pursuit of, or the genuine pursuit of the best interest of the working class, as China is doing, as Cuba and North Korea would like to do, but of course they're being constrained by the material conditions of embargo. So, these are the.
We do know North Korea does not want China's path. China's been pushing them, encouraging them, fighting with them over it for decades.
I don't know. I will know what North Korea wants to do once the embargo is lifted. As long as there is this mercilessly enforced embargo, just
well,
as
they have
bad
China
as
on their border, so I mean, China could open up trade with them if they wanted, and does
and
to
they do,
varying
right?
degrees.
I mean, there's a lot of trade, and I mean, North
Yeah.
Korea is not doing bad. But there is a lot of trade in North Korea. There's a lot of black market trade. So the thing is, I think there's secondary sanctions.
They want
right?
trade for sure. Whether they want market reforms is a different question. They want to be out from the embargo.
Yeah. Well, why? I mean, of course they want out from the embargo.
All countries want trade.
Yeah.
Whether their economy is nationalized or not, they want trade.
So I'm not sure, North Korea wouldn't be happy to have the freedom to pursue, their own, economic path. And I'm certain it would, as they did that, it would begin more and more to resemble, the success that China has had, the success that Vietnam has had, and the success that is not allowed to Cuba or North Korea because of the embargo.
As MK was saying, I mean, this is part of the tension between China and North Korea's refusal of their reforms and pursuit
So,
of
I mean, you're
nuclear
suggesting
weapons.
China's demanding that they reform and they're not, and they're refusing these demands? I'm not aware of that.
Well, there's an
Not demands, but suggestions.
structural
They've been recommending it. What, Carlo?
entirely different structured governments between the two. I mean, that's at play because one family controls North Korea, and in China, it's the Communist Party. It's completely different.
But what needs to be appreciated, though, is the the economic power of Western imperialism and their ability to enact extraterritorial sanctions on entities, private entities and public entities that violate their embargoes. And so there is a risk. That's why China has been very ginger with their approach to Cuba. They currently are putting in a whole bunch of like 92 what are these things called?
Helping with their power system, right?
Yeah, they're putting in parks of what are those things called? Where the sun hits the panels, solar panels. They're putting in 92 solar panel parks to help them. But again, there is a risk for private entities as well as public entities to to oppose U.S. embargo law, and they can be sanctioned. And so I think that has a lot to do with it. And it's also, of course, that China is interested. Their future is with normalization with the big countries, and so they don't see like how sacrificing good relations that they've had for decades with the United States. It doesn't make pragmatic sense to sacrifice that in order to violate what the US says you can't do with North Korea or Cuba. And so it's like they're playing a pragmatic game, and they're looking long term. They're looking at long term, and they're not responsible. Don't blame China for the evilness of Western imperialism and their embargoes. Like China has to deal with that, and I think they're dealing with it in the correct way. Would I like to see more China support of Cuba and North Korea? Of course. But ultimately, the West, the United States, is to blame for the struggles that are going on in these countries that the U.S. is trying to destroy. I don't know who is interested in this conversation. There's probably not many people that care about these things, but there's very stimulating to me. Any final thoughts? I've got 2 eye appointments for the kids today. I've got about an hour before I got to get to one of them.
I'll mention an odd fact that's way off, has nothing to do with what we talked about. But BlackRock has ceased investment, apparently, in Ukraine, which is very telling about.
Yeah, no, I heard they were having a difficult time attracting investment because everybody knows.
Yes, and that was revealed. I mean, it went in the news earlier this week that apparently that had been made in January with Trump taking office. I don't know what to make of that opinion. I mean, I think the pages that were sharing that news were deliberately being kind of misleading about it, you know, burying that lead in the text of the story that this was something that happened in January and not recently. Because, you know, I could see investors being uncertain about Ukraine when Trump first took office because of all of his rhetoric, but I don't know. I mean, it might, investors' feelings might still be the same, but they might have also improved. So I don't know if that's the BlackRock story is a useful indicator.
I mean, we can hope the West has given up on their, but yeah, I think Monday will be a big announcement. I mean, it's been billed as, you know, he's got something to say. He's going to say it Monday. And so, is it just going to be another $300 million, weapons package, or is it going to be something bigger and more? And then, Greg, I just appreciate you stimulating me and giving me things to say, but then I always feel like I just talk over everyone and nobody else gets a word in edgewise. And so I know you have your own opinions, and so I kind of feel bad that you say something and it really gets me going, and then I just don't shut up. And so I hope you have had an opportunity to share your opinion too. And you don't have things that you would have liked to say that I didn't give you a chance because I was too busy talking.
No, I'm not pent up.
Okay, good. So yeah, I think we missed like 3 shows in a row. We try and do 2 a week. Sometimes it's a struggle, especially with the holidays. I fully intend to reconvene on Tuesday, so I hope that we can do that. But thank you, Ian. Thank you, Carlo. Thank you again, Greg. And we will see you hopefully next week.
Thank you, Billy. See you, everyone.